Good afternoon, ladybugs and yellow jackets. Welcome to this Friday's episode of Author Reads here on Fae Productions. I am your host, Fairy Princess Lolly, and I do not feel well today. So if I seem like a complete space cadet, it is because I have taken many healing potions from the human world, and you can't trust those humans and their healing potions. So things may go well or they may go sideways. So first things first, out of the way, as always, please hit the like and subscribe and ring the bell if you would like to get future notifications about our shows. We do 3 shows a week at least, and we're on Friday. Tomorrow is our Cyber Samhain Day, so we'll be here again at 7:30 p.m. Pacific tomorrow to celebrate Halloween together, open our candy, stuff our faces, and have a costume contest and other such fun things. So it would be super awesome if you would join us for that. And then also, today's show is sponsored by Redstone Sisters Design, and I want to thank them especially for contributing some of the prizes to the gift baskets for Cyber Samhain tomorrow for the costume contest. They've been here on the show before for handmade home shopping. They're very nice. Redstone Sisters Designs, they create affordable chainmail jewelry in a variety of colors and styles, and they specialize in blending chainmail with beads and other elements to create unique and vibrant pieces. Many of their designs can be recreated in the colors of your choice, so you can always feel free to reach out to them for custom items. If you're looking for something, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram, where they are for updates, new listings, sneak peeks of future items, and probably a heads up on sales that they may have coming, should they do that. So their information is going in the ticker, and then it is also in the low bar or the description, the expanded area. I don't know. We call it the low bar on YouTube, but I don't know what they call it necessarily on Facebook. But if you click that little expand button, you'll find their website and links to all of their things. So with that said, thank you again, Redstone Sisters, for contributing to Cyber Samhain and also for being on the show and being an awesome vendor. So I hope everybody goes and checks you out. And with that said, then we will welcome today's author, Alma Alexander. I'm saying that correctly, I assume.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, welcome to the show, Alma.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, please. Please, if you will, just introduce yourself to our audience a little bit and tell us some about yourself and what you write. And yeah, let's get to know you a little bit. Give a shout out to any people you feel deserve a shout out.
Okay. Well, hi. I'm Alma Alexander. I'm the Duchess of Fantasy, hence the crown. And that's actually true. I'm a real duchess. The real dukedom has long since disappeared in the Middle Ages, but it was given to a member of my ancestry to rule over by a grateful king at some point in 1389. And I'm the lineal descendant of that family, so I do have a coat of arms and everything. I'm a real duchess.
Wow. Very nice.
Of course, the real dukedom is long gone, but you know what? Hey, I mean, if I can do it, I can do it. I write fantasy and science fiction of all stripes. The 2 things that I'm here to talk about today is one of them is my first real serious science fiction novel, which is The Second Star. And the other is a collection that I'm putting together right now on Kickstarter, on crowdfund, the Fractured Fairy Tales, which is a collection of fairy tales, old, new, told and retold, reimagined. I, in point of fact, dreamed a new fairy tale last night, and it has the distinction, I think, of being the first science fiction fairy tale.
I am adding your starter to the.
It actually works in both subgenres. It's a fairy tale and it's science fiction. So, you know, I do these weird things. I wake up in the morning and I tell my long-suffering husband, you know what I dreamed today? And he says, oh, God. So, yeah, living inside my head can occasionally be interesting.
I think that's actually quite fascinating. I do a lot of story dreaming as well. I'm a prolific dreamer, if you will. Last night's streams must have been quite interesting because of the night potions that I took. I'm sure I was speaking a lot in my sleep, but I'm not sure it meant anything. but I too do I'll wake up with whole stories that I dreamt about. So so how did you get started in writing? Has this been your profession since the very beginning, or did you used to do something else and then you merged into this?
I actually have a master's degree in molecular biology.
So not in writing.
I started when I went to look. I always wrote. I've been writing since I could hold a pencil. I taught myself to read when I was 4 because I just needed to do that. But I've always been writing, and I'm going to tell you one of my favorite stories in terms of that. One of my own literary gods is Roger Zelazny, and I happened to be lucky enough to. This was way back, but this was literally like months before he died. He was a guest of honor at a science fiction convention in New Zealand where I was living at the time, and I happened to get into a workshop, which he and another guest of honor at the time were presiding over. And the other writer, who was Rhonda McIntyre, who subsequently became a friend of blessed memory. She died recently too. But she gave me back my story, and it was annotated like to an inch of its life. Every little corner had little writing on it, and this here and this there. It was like penciled in remarks, and it was like, yikes, what am I going to do with this? I think I learned more about writing from that one story and her edits than I did for 2 years before that. It was just unbelievable. But the thing that stayed with me, and it still stays with me, is that Roger Zelazny had nothing in front of him. No story, no trace of anything. He just sat there. He looked at me and he said, I have 2 questions for you. He said, how long have you been writing? So I told him since year dot, and before I knew how to write, I told lies. I was telling stories kind of thing. I'm a storyteller. I was born that way. And he looked at me and he said, okay, and do you read and or write a lot of poetry? And I had to say guilty because my grandfather was a poet and he weaned me on things. I mean, he was reading me his sonnets when I was 5, and I told him when sonnet didn't scan, and I was right. I mean, to this day, if you give me the first line of a sonnet, I can write one in 2 minutes flat, because if I can get the rhyme scheme going and I can get the rhyme, it's so in my blood that I can just come up with one. And Roger Zelazny looked at me and he says, it shows you have a voice all of your own. No one else is ever going to write this way.
Well, that is very insightful, actually. And that's kind of a cool anecdote there, right? So I completely I am so brain fried today. I'm so sorry. I totally had a question in all of this, and now I have forgotten it. Oh, yes, I was going to say, you have a bit of an accent. Where are you originally from? Uh-oh.
Okay, this is a fun game.
Is that your disguise? Is that your mustachio? I am in disguise.
Yes, this is a fun game. This is a fun game I play with people. Where do you think my accent comes from?
To me, it sounds perhaps German.
No. It's a mongrel, okay? I was born in Eastern Europe, which I probably have a trace of. I went to school in the UK, well, Wales, really. So I can still drop into Welsh when I want to. I mean, they sing it, they don't talk it. They can just talk like this, right? I can still drop into Welsh at the drop of a hat. But I went to school in Wales, and I lived in Africa, different places in Africa for I don't know, a third of my life. So I picked up different bits and pieces from there. Central Africa, South Africa, little bits from that. Then I moved to New Zealand, and I picked up a little bit from there. And I've been living
all over the world. And
I've been living in the States for the last 20 years. So I've got a little bit of an overlay that. So nothing German in here, but a lot of other stuff.
So what do you think is the most profound or impacting place that you've ever lived with regards to your writing? Like, I mean, you've been so many places, and surely some of them must have just been extra magical. You know what I mean?
Wales.
What
Wales,
makes it?
Wales is just so steeped in things, and yeah, there's just a mist hanging around it, and you just wander through it, and you're halfway into a different world, even without looking twice around the corner. It's just a very beautiful, this is North Wales. South Wales is a little bit different. That's more of a coal mining country, but North Wales is mythological.
I have not ever been to Wales, so I've been to England and Scotland, but not to Wales.
Oh, I've been to Scotland too.
Yeah, that was an interesting adventure.
As far as accents go, I am a chameleon. I can pick it up and I can kind of throw it back at people. I can probably put on a very upper class English accent right now if you want me to.
Well, that just my lady. So go ahead.
People seem to think that sometimes I'm mocking them, but I'm not. I'm assimilating the accent that they're talking to me in, and I'm giving it back to them in exactly the same thing. I'm mirroring, not mocking, kind of thing.
I actually can empathize with that too. Maybe empathize is the wrong word. Identify with that to some degree, because I do that. I learn very audioly based. So when I go places and I hear how people speak, I immediately kind of try to start falling into that. Sometimes whether or not I'm really trying, that's just how my brain wants to do the things. So I have studied some languages in the past, and my professors always told me that I had a good accent for speaking a foreign language and not being a native speaker. I mean, for all I know, that means I tried, because many people don't even try. But so now, where are you from in the United States? And do you do local conventions? How do you normally?
I live in the Pacific Northwest. The way I describe it to people is you head for Canada, and just before you get there, turn right.
It's kind of true, though. It's kind of true.
Well, actually, I'm literally physically closer to Vancouver in Canada than I am to Seattle.
So that would put you north of me, actually. So almost certainly north of me, since I'm a little bit north of Seattle myself. So
I'm in Bellingham.
Oh yeah, you're like spitting distance.
Yeah. But of course, the borders are closed these days, so you can't really go into Canada anymore. So.
I mean, I haven't tried to escape to Canada yet, but the thought has crossed my mind.
Yeah, I think everybody's temperature is being taken at every outside. Yeah, never mind.
Oh wow, that's things I didn't know.
As far as conventions are concerned, I haven't really done anything this year. I don't think anybody has.
Oh no, not this year.
I've done a bunch of virtual stuff. Conventions have gone virtual. It's been a different experience, but it's really interesting doing a panel when you don't have that audience back and forth. You don't see the people who are there. You don't actually sit there and you get a response to something you've said, and it feels like you and your 2 and 3 other people in the panel are actually sitting there and talking to each other, and you know that there's other people listening, and it's disconcerting.
Go ahead.
You don't actually notice. You don't see. I mean, when you're in a panel in a normal convention, you're sitting in a panel room, and there are people who are responding. If you say something funny, somebody's going to laugh. If you say something off, someone's going to frown. You get the response back.
Yes, there's an interaction.
You just don't get that interaction in a virtual convention. It was pretty strange before I got used to it.
I confess I haven't actually, I am very familiar with the convention circuit, but I have not really done any of this online convention business. And I'm curious if you can speak a little bit. I don't know how many people are in the same boat as me with regards to that, but can you speak a little bit as to what does that actually look like? Like, how do they convert a convention into an online experience?
Well, the last sort of reasonably big one that I was at, they had a Discord channel running at the same time as the convention. So you could, if you had the kind of ADHD attention spreading deficit thing, you could follow the panel that you were in over here, and then you could do the Discord thing on the other side of the screen, and you could see people responding to that. So there was a little bit of a response going on. But it was really hard to keep going because you were trying to keep a conversation going over here. But then if you looked away from that and started reading something else, it was obviously going to take your attention away. You're going, huh? You said something about that? So it was hard to do that. But it kind of worked because they had one designated comment driver who was basically whose duty it was to corral the commentary and give it back to the panelists, just to give them an idea of what was being said. But then you have the technical difficulties aspect as well. And there was one really disastrous panel where something crashed and we all went offline for maybe 2 or 3 minutes at a very bad spot. And the people who could no longer hear or see us were carrying on the discussion over there in Discord. We weren't going there, and we were talking somewhere over here in a completely different thing. But they couldn't see us, and they couldn't hear us, and they were just discussing it over here in a complete. Yeah, it just went south very fast.
Yeah.
That's the difficulty with the virtual stuff. You really do not have the immediacy. Yeah.
Yep, hard. And I definitely know that the dividing of attention, because we obviously do things here, and this is essentially what I'm about to go do when we get to the reading time, is that I will then be with everybody in the comments section and watching that for you while you read. Speaking of which, what do you plan to read to us this afternoon, Your Grace?
Well, I was depending on how much time I've got a section from the book, The Second Star. And one of my favorite things, in a nutshell, let me just give you the back blurb of here. The Parada had been lost for almost 200 years before they recovered the ship, drifting in Stygian interstellar darkness, and brought her home again. But that was not the miracle. The miracle was that the crew was still alive. That was also the problem. 6 crew members went out of the Parada, Earth's first starship. All contact was lost and the ship vanished. When it came home, as somebody said, 6 people went out, more than 70 came back. We had a split personality thing happen, and everybody, all the crew members who returned, were split into psychological smithereens.
Oh man. I was thinking either that or everybody got bored in space and now there's a new population.
No. But 6 people came back carrying a multitude in here. Which gave me a lot of leeway to write about things. It gave me a lot of space to put characters, different characters, into the same person. And one of my sub-personalities doesn't have a name. He's basically just known as the poet.
This is cool. And so this is what you're reading to us from today. Now, before we jump right into that, because probably after you're done reading, we'll move into something different. But I do want to take a look at this really quick. I'm going to share your Kickstarter here onto the screen just so everybody can see. And if you could just speak to this a little bit, because it looks like you're almost to your goal there. And so I want to hear what this is about. I need your help,
people. I need your help. I need to get there. This is a collection of short. In fact, I'm going to read the short one here, and I might read a little bit of a story that's going to be in there as well, if I have the time. Okay. But essentially, my very first published book ever was a collection of 3 original fairy tales. And I grew up, I cut my teeth on the real fairy tales, the Hans Christian Andersen, my Little Mermaid, the real one, not the Disney one. I mean, I grew up on the real fairy tales. They just shaped me. They just made me be who I am today. And this collection is a lot of the stuff that the retold fairy tales that you might recognize from the obvious characters that are in there, but from a completely different angle. There are original fairy tales which are basically thought up from the raw materials, but they're not something you've ever seen before. And there's things that are fairy tale-like. I mean, people like Oscar Wilde wrote incredible fairy tales, and a lot of my stuff has deep roots in that. It's kind of dark chocolate.
Wild thing. This is cool. I'm looking at this tier. also immortalize yourself or someone you love as a named character in the story. That sounds super fun. So you guys, if you want to just throw a little support, here it is. You can just go to kickstarter.com/Alma Alexander. I will put it into the comments of the show just as soon as she starts reading, so that if anybody wants to pop over there, I can just send you guys the link. But you should be able to find it pretty easy on Kickstarter. And we've got just even some basic support levels. So, and then of course also immortalize yourself, which of course I like to highly consider. So with that said, though, I will go ahead and give you the screen here, Alma, and let you read to us.
Okay, well, first I'll start reading from this, and I'll introduce you to the poet because he's one of my favorite fractured characters. Just to give you a little bit of background, my psychologist protagonist has taken the crew out for the first time since they came back to Earth, outside, out under the stars, out under the sky. It broke Stella's heart to watch the crew step out into the rooftop garden, slowly, stealthily, warily, as though they expected every shadow to attack them. She remembered once seeing, when she was very young and very affected by such things, old videos of dogs used in laboratory experiments back in the days when they still used live animals to test chemicals. A rescue group had acquired a handful of beagles which had been reared from a very young puppyhood inside the laboratory, dogs which had never seen the outside of a lab, never felt the wind in their ears, never had their paws touch grass or dirt. They brought the dogs out into a patch of lawn in someone's backyard and set the carriers out there with the doors open, leaving the dogs to explore on their own terms. Stella had wept when she had watched the wary animals sit cowering for a long, long time in their carrier cages, until one brave soul decided to put an experimental paw out, touch grass, pull the paw back in consternation and stare at that unfamiliar surface, then slowly, slowly touch the grass again, put its weight on that foot, take another paw out and let it rest in the grass, trembling, its nose sucking in the new smells and questing for danger. And then, when one of the dogs had finally gathered enough courage to emerge, the others did, one by one, until they all stood on the grass in joyful bewilderment, disbelieving that what their senses were telling them. Those dogs had ended up in that video racing around the grass with abandon, simply accepting the fact of their freedom and a sense of a new life that was about to open up for them as they danced, darted, rolled, permitted themselves at last to be touched and hugged by humans who loved them instead of using them as living records of scientific data. Stella didn't know if that kind of a happy ending was even possible for the Parada crew, but she watched them stepping onto the rooftop garden with the same weary anxiety as those captive beagles, as though they were touching grass for the first time. The moon was full and bathed in the garden in a white light, casting sharp shadows. It was September, late in the season, but some lingering roses were still blooming, and a few of them, the dark red ones, black in the pale moonlight, were the ancient kind which still possessed the kind of rich scent that had once made them so beloved. The air in the garden was redolent with that perfume. Stars glittered palely in the sky, but the tower rose above the city, and the light spilled a long way below on the ground, washed out the brightness of that might have been the glory of the night sky. Some stars were there, though, and Stella saw Alaya stand rooted with both feet flat on the ground, and her arms straight down by her sides, with both hands splayed out as though she was trying to keep her balance on a swaying ship. Her head thrown straight back, her eyes gazing up into the sky, avidly, as though she was trying to count the stars that she could glimpse up there. Han Milgar wore a faint smile on his face, gazing both upwards in the sky and outwards across the lights of the city, and further out, the abrupt darkness that was open water. "That must be quite the sight in the light of day," Han remarked, directing the remark at nobody in particular. This was his world, the world he had given his mind, his body, his life to, and all that it had left to give him in return was a glimpse of city lights in the darkness of the night sea and a scattering of faded stars. Stella felt a stab of something that felt strangely like guilt, although she had done nothing to claim responsibility for any of what had happened to the captain of the Parada. Lily May, her eyes on the ground and not the sky, had padded over to the very edge of the garden and was gazing avidly out over the city. Stella's instincts tingled, and she was on the point of crossing to Lily May in case she needed some steadying attention, But just as she was about to move, she felt a light hand on her elbow and turned to see Philip by her side, his eyes also on the slender woman standing alone in a tangle of moon shadows. "I got this," he said softly. Stella hesitated and then nodded. Philip crossed the grass to where Lily May stood. Stella could see barely more than silhouette shapes in this distance, but Lily May's head turned at Philip's approach, and then she and Philip leaned in towards one another, engaged in a whispered conversation she could not hear. She scanned the garden for the others again. Moonlight glittered off Boz Dimitrov's cheeks as though his eyes overflowed with tears. There was something about the stillness of his figure that suddenly made Stella think of emptiness, as though he was just a shell of a body with everything that had once been inside that body now gone, fled, to the stars. She could not see where his gaze was fixed precisely, but there was a sort of focus there, as though he was searching for something very specific, for the glint of passion in a lover's eyes. Stella felt as though she would be intruding on something close and intimate if she disturbed him, and she made the decision to rely on Jerry Hillerman, who was still stuck close to Boz's side, silent, close enough to Stella for her to notice his nose flaring at the scent of roses, to intervene if it became necessary. A few steps away, gazing at the sky in what looked like a more relaxed position than Elias, but still revealed a tight focus on the visible stars scattered across the night sky, Rob Hillerman stood with his arms crossed across his chest, smiling faintly. Stella drifted over towards him. "You know," he said, apparently aware of her approach before she came nearly close enough to have been detected, and certainly before she had said anything out loud, "I feel like a boy again, staring at the skies washed by city lights, knowing that the stars were out there, finding it hard to see them, and tonight with the city and the moon." "Are you okay?" Stella asked incongruously. This had seemed like such a good idea, and it might have been if there had been 6 of her, one for each crew member, one shadow to watch each one of them and gauge their reactions and remember them and file them away and see how they responded to breathing the free air of home once again. She did stop to acknowledge the irony of wishing she had the gift of splitting herself up just like her subjects had done, if only to study their own fractures better. But even while keeping a corner of her eye on everyone, ready to react to the most minuscule of changes as soon as she could perceive it, she now found her attention focused on Rob. If he had been one of those beagles she had wept over, he'd have been the one to have had the ancestral memory of grass, dug it out from somewhere, buried deep in his subconscious, and he would have been the one to simply accept it, love it, take it as something that belonged to him and was rightfully a part of his world. He was relaxed. The word she was groping for was content. He just fit in this place, in this moment, as though the world had been shaped around him and bent so that he would find a comfortable place within it. And yet. When he spoke, it was in a voice Stella recognized and shivered to hear. "I remember this place," said the poet in that rich velvet tone that had raised Stella's hackle the first time she heard it. "When I was a child, I dwelled in a garden with high walls, and I was safe there and contented and protected, and nothing evil could ever happen to me there, because this was home, and it was a happy place full of light. I thought it was the whole world, and I was ready to accept that world, those walls, those boundaries, because they kept me safe and happy. It even perhaps smelled of these very same blessed roses, and the very same blessed faint stars twinkled above it, and I was young and innocent, and I knew only that comfort that surrounded me and gave me value in the context of that place, and shaped me into that small young thing, ignorant of all but only the things that I knew were real to me, because I could touch and taste and smell them, and happy in that ignorance." "Hey," said Stella, her voice a little unsteady. "We agreed." The poet turned to look at her, those large, luminous eyes glittering in the moonlight. "But I grew up," he went on relentlessly, still wearing that same faint smile that played around the corners of his lips. "I grew up, and I've passed the gates, and I've been beyond the walls, and I've seen the shadows that teem on the outside, the shadows with claws and with teeth and with terrible glowing eyes of hunger and covetousness, the shadows that would devour you. I have seen them, and I have known the fear of them, but I have faced them, and I have faced that fear, and I understand now, without those shadows, even just the stories of those shadows, the light in that childhood garden could never have been so beloved and so bright. I have stood outside the walls, and they look so small, so fragile from here, and yet I know, I remember clearly how high and how strong they seemed to me when I still dwelt within them. I have left the garden of my childhood, I have walked the wilderness that lies all around it, and I have fought its traps and its monsters, and sometimes I win and sometimes I lose, but there is one thing that I never knew before I stepped into that wild desert, and that is that a place is stark and deadly and beautiful beyond reason. It isn't safe, it isn't protected. But it's free, and its shadows sing, and the songs are sung with the voices of dark angels, and once you have heard those songs, you are lost forever. His arms unfolded, his hands dropping to his sides, his breath escaping in a sigh. You can never return, you know, he said. You can never come home again, not truly home. You can never come back to that safe, happy garden where you were a child. Because the wilderness leaves its seeds in you, and the seeds sprout no matter how hard you try to stop them, and something takes roots inside of you, and in the fullness of time it blooms, a flower that is dark, so dark, and yet it is velvet to the touch, and it is full of stars, and its name is yearning, a yearning for what you know is out there, will always be out there, the knowledge that there's always going to be more. He stopped and fully turned to look at Stella, who stood speechless with tracks of tears on her cheeks. The poet was gone. It was Rob Hillerman who stood there again, and it was he who reached out a gentle hand and wiped the tears from her face. I'm sorry, he said, and sounded genuinely regretful. That was an ill way to repay a miracle. Thank you for this. It means more than you can ever know. I suspect you'll be made to pay for it.
That was from The Second Star. So, chapter from that book. Now, I didn't catch earlier. Was there one other thing that you also wanted to read, or is
I was going to read you a short story from the fairy tale book, which is not your classic short story. But what I mean by some stories are fairy tale like, they've got the atmosphere in it, and it just. The poet in that book is very much me. I tend to write very lush. So this story came in because it has a fairy tale feel to it. And it's quite a short one. It's only about 2,500 words long. So.
Okay. Well, we did have a quick question here from William Joseph Roberts, I guess, regarding what you were just reading, and they were asking, would you describe this, I guess, as a psych thriller?
It has been described as that in reviews, yes.
Okay, because of all that. It sounds quite fascinating, and wouldn't that be creepy to just talk to somebody but then suddenly have them be someone else?
Yeah, there are characters in this that literally switch in the middle of a sentence, and the protagonist is learning to figure out who's talking just by looking at the face, the expression, the way they carry themselves are different.
You know, if you don't mind my slipping in a small question, how do you go about researching or studying these different types of personalities so that you can write them? Because there's so many, based on the way that you've written the book. How do you bring those to life individually?
Well, one book that I'm going to give a shout out to as one of the most perfect novels I've ever read is Matt Ruff's Set This House in Order, and that is about a multiple personality character, and he did a stellar job with that. I mean, that book is literally one of the most perfect novels ever written. This is the same guy who wrote Lovecraft Country, which is now very popular.
Yes, we have watched all of Lovecraft Country, actually. So,
well, this was earlier. This was, I think, maybe 3 books back from Lovecraft Country. It was utterly beautiful, utterly beautiful. This is a writer who there are very few writers whose new books I will buy sight unseen simply because it's a new book by that writer, and Matt Ruff is one of those people.
All right. Okay, well, I will turn the screen over to you again, and we will hear a short story from Fractured Fairy Tales.
Okay, this one's called Go Through. It's a street. There are houses. They are old, built of brick, mortared, painted. The windows are framed in carved wood. There may be gargoyles in the edges of the roof. I don't know. I don't look up. I never look up. At my feet, the cobbles, uneven, grey, worn. Sometimes wet with a persistent, annoying drizzle, or with rain that had already come and gone, leaving just puddles in its wake. Sometimes dry, dusty, absorbing sunlight, radiating heat back. I have to keep looking down as I walk because the street looks as though it might once have been a wave of water, a wave rising and falling, a memory of motion now caught and frozen for eternity under the old cobbles. If I don't look where I'm going, I will turn an ankle, twist a foot, stub a toe. There will be pain. Pain. There's always pain. I think I carry it with me. I brought it here. I wear it. I leave it in the tracks I leave behind in the cobblestones. Right until I fetch up once again at a door that should never have been in front of me. That's the way I live my life. I stumble and stagger in the direction that I'm perfectly certain I'm supposed to be moving in, and then I find myself yet again in front of the unexpected door, the door I should never have met, never have touched, the door I should never even have considered walking through, because I know where it goes, because I have no idea where it goes, because it is not a door that was meant for me, but here I am, and here it is, and I open it, and I step through. She doesn't know when she wakes where she is, not quite. The bed, the room, they look vaguely familiar, but she can't be sure whether it's because she's seen this particular room or slept in this particular bed before, or because she's seen 1,000 rooms just like this one. Beside her on the other pillow, he sleeps. He snores. There's a shadow of a beard on his face. She tries to hunt through her mind for his name, but fails. It's a man, that's all she knows. She gets up slowly, carefully, disturbing as little of the bed as she can. She lays one long-fingered hand on the dusty curtain, brings her face up close and inhales the musty scent of fabric which hadn't been washed for years, puts her eyes to the crack where the two wings of the curtains have been pulled together, peers outside. Nothing is quite familiar. Nothing is completely strange. She almost thinks she recognizes the place. She's not sure enough to swear to it. If she walked down the street and turned a corner, she's almost but not quite completely certain that she would see an open square with a tree whose outlines she has known for years, with certain shops lining the square, with a worn path through the grass where people persist in taking shortcuts. But perhaps none of this is real. Perhaps she has just dreamed it all, there in that bed which is still warm with the memory of her presence. Perhaps she has been put together that square in her mind from dozens of mental snapshots of places she has known but has never existed, in the shape or form that she now visualizes it, outside the confines of her imagination. She glances back to the bed. He's still asleep. She suddenly knows that she could not bear it if he woke, if he looked up and frowned as if he couldn't remember her face at all, or worse, if he woke up and smiled and called her by name and called her darling. She couldn't face any of it. She's alone, here, now, in a cold room with the grey light of early morning gathering outside, and the first shadowy shapes of scurrying people hugging the houses, scuttling along the sidewalks with their heads down and their shoulders hunched, their hands gloved and their collars raised. That tree in that square, which may or may not exist, no longer has its leaves. She knows this for a certainty. It's autumn, late autumn, sliding into winter. The light tells her so. She dresses in silence. There's a run in her pantyhose draped across the back of the chair. No help for that. She slides her feet into the stockings, smooths them over her legs, pulls on a nondescript dark skirt, a sweater. There's a battered handbag lying by the door. She pads towards it in stocking feet, carrying a pair of sensible shoes in her left hand, picks up the handbag with the fingertips of her right hand. There is no other woman here. This bag must belong to her, after all. Somewhere soon, not here, not now, perhaps over a cup of coffee in a cheap diner nearby, she's going to open the bag and rummage inside, for identity, for something to tell her who she is, what she's doing here. She hesitates at the door, shoes in one hand, bag in the other. It is not the door she remembers seeing before, but she remembers the fact that she has often hesitated between strange doors. The doors never lead quite where she expects them to, that she quite probably never meant to be in this unknown room, this unknown house, on this unknown street, with this unknown man in the bed. She was never meant to be here at all. She doesn't know if she can leave, if she is able to leave. If, when she walks through the door, it will mean leaving her life behind. But she knows nothing about what's on the other side of this door, just as she knows nothing at all about the things which she can see on this side of it, hesitating before it. She knows nothing at all, nothing. So stay or go, it matters very little. She reaches out with the edge of her hand holding her shoes. She pushes down the handle. The door opens just a crack, silently. She doesn't look back as she slips through, into shadow. Behind her, the room sinks back into shadow, too. It's a road, a dirt road. I've been on it forever, or perhaps I've only stepped on it moments ago. I don't know. I don't remember. Time is elastic, after all, bulging and distending, sometimes worn very thin, thin enough to lift up your eye and look through it and be able to glimpse other things on the far side as though you were looking through a fine chiffon scarf. But this is a road. It's dusty. There's nothing on either side of it but fields, empty ones. No cows, no horses, not even hay bales. Just wind-blown fields, and in between stands of trees. There are wire fences between fields and road. I'm not sure if they're to keep me off the fields or to keep the things that don't exist in those fields from stepping onto the road and gobbling me up. There's a crossroads. It's just a place with a gigantic plus sign drawn on the landscape. There's a signpost right there in the middle. It has signs pointing in the 4 directions, but the signs have either worn down into illegibility or else they're in a different language altogether. I don't understand them. Beside the signpost, there's a door. Just a door frame with a closed door within. There's even a key in the lock, but it's just a door and I can walk right around it, and it's a door from either side, leading absolutely nowhere at all. I'm certain, utterly certain, that those travelers for whom the signpost is intelligible will never see this door at all. But for me, for those like me, there's always a door, a strange door which leads nowhere, a door that is an alternative to directions. They're unknowable and unknown, a part of a signpost just as mysterious as all the rest. Every door opens into something. There are just too many doors that I should never even have seen, let alone passed through. Too many doors that lead from darkness into shadow, or into light too blinding to see. Doors that make me stumble. Doors that will never allow me to pass them by once I've seen them. Once seen, never unseen, always there. A door ignored will return again and again and again until I reach for that key, for that handle, and crack it open. A door that should never have been in my path. A door without which my path would not exist. She gets out of the car, slowly, her movements hinting at fatigue. She isn't sure how long she's been driving. She isn't sure where she started from, not anymore. There's a large, black and battered duffel bag in the back seat. As far as she knows, it's her only luggage. She has, in a moment she thinks of the bag, no idea what it contains, what items she had thought essential enough to carry to her instead of leaving them. Wherever it was that she had come from. Her toothbrush, her childhood teddy bear, her Bible, her shotgun. Around her, the darkness is beginning to rise, to seep into the sky from the black shadows underneath the trees ringing the parking lot, empty except for her. There's a house looming just in front of her, a house with a sign illuminated by a single dim light, a sign that proclaims it to be an inn. It's a haven, a refuge, a place to rest for the night. There's a light behind the drawn curtains of the windows facing out into the parking lot. Somebody's home, but there's a door, and the door is closed. She hesitates before she knocks. The house feels like a stage set, a two-dimensional thing, no more, behind which lies the chaos of backstage. Fake potted plants and a cracked coffee cup and a ratty moth-eaten sofa with the doilies from last year's production of arsenic and old lace still draped on it, and a typewriter with no ribbon in it, and a bunch of dusty silk roses, and a stuffed dog, and half-painted wooden cutouts of trees and people, and of a fireplace with painted fire which gives no warmth at all. If she passes through this door, she might simply be stepping into all that fakery, giving a life in which nothing is real at all. Or she might be stepping from that fake in life into something warm and real and waiting, a world where that fireplace is real and so is the fire, and she can curl up in the corner of a sofa with a real dog curled up at her feet and real coffee in the cup, all just waiting for her. Maybe the bag in the back of the car is empty, just a stage prop. Maybe the car doesn't run at all. Maybe all of it at her back, the gathering twilight, the vehicle whose keys even now dangle from her fingers. But are they real keys or fake? The mysterious piece of luggage supposedly belonging to her, all of that. Perhaps it would simply vanish if she stepped through this door, as though none of it had ever been. What a strange dream she's been having, of lying and running and hiding and looking for sanctuary. She should never have come here, never have been on this empty and isolated road so late in the day, never have known this sin existed, never hesitated in front of this door. She should never have seen this door in her life. If she passes through, she will be a different person. She knows this. It frightens her. It makes her happy. She reaches for the door handle. It opens to her touch. If it opens to her touch, she decides arbitrarily on the spot, then she will walk through. If not, if it's locked and she has to ring or knock to ask for admittance, she will not stop here. She will drive on into the night, into the doorless night. The door gives under her hand, swings inwards. There's a light somewhere within. Just as well. She knows without knowing that she would have come up against this door again if she didn't choose it this time round. That's the way things are. She steps through. She's already forgotten about the bag on the back seat of the car. Nothing it contains has anything to do with her, not anymore. The future is behind a curtain. The past is a long lost foreign country, almost forgotten. It's a gate made of wrought iron. It's a coal hatch. It's an airlock. It's a gaping hole in the ground, only darkness within and beyond. There are many doors. They lead from memory into oblivion, from darkness to light, from warmth into icy cold, from dream into wakeful reality, from life into death, and then back again. I've seen many. Too many. So have you. We'll see more. There are portals, there are gates, they are inevitable, and they are everywhere, and there are some which you should never have seen or passed through at all. But you go through where the waters of life wash you up, flotsam and jetsam, lapping at the steps leading from the sea up into the threshold of a door you don't recognize, and yet always knew you would be there. Doors are choices. There are wishes. There are sacrifices. Oh, yes, there are. Look down at the old bloodstains at your feet, traces of those who came here before you. There are passages. I wear a key and a string around my neck. It fits any lock. You carry one too. We all do. We are all latchkey kids. The grown-ups are away. We're home alone and must do the best we can. A door can lead home or into frightening alien places you cannot even hope to understand. There are doors, even the ones you should never have seen, never touched, never listened with your ear against the grain of the wood for the faint sounds of what might be stirring beyond. Even those, the ones you don't understand, especially those, they're yours, they're meant for you. It's a street, it's a road, it's a sidewalk, it's an alley, it's a path between the stars. Stop and look, there's a door. You'll never recognize it. You might. Go through.
Well, and there we have that. I presume that is the end of that particular story.
Yep.
That is, oh man, I was so engrossed into that, just sucked into that particular story. And it felt quite different than the previous one that you read, just, it was awesome. So we have a yeah, I was like, the feel between the two different stories was, the difference in that feel was very pronounced in my mind. And especially I got the feeling in the space story of, how you watch some movies in outer space and they have very little to no musical soundtrack, and so they take place in silence. I got that feeling from the first reading. And then this feeling that from this story, to me, just, it felt like being drawn in, something just trying to pull you in through that door, especially with all the imagery of the crossroads and keys. It was just cool. It was very intense. So yeah, see, very intense. So we do have a couple of questions. I'm going to scroll back here, and just for all of you guys watching at home. Oh, I'm sorry. I have a sneeze. It's like right in my nose, and I'm trying to. Yeah, it's threatening, and I don't like it. Those of you watching at home, please, if you will, now is the time to start putting your name into the comment section if you would like to be entered into the drawing for a copy of which book are you going to give away here, Alma? Yes, the second star. Okay, so if you would like a copy of the second star, please, now is the time to put your name into the comments, and then I will get you onto the Wheel of Win, but we're going to ask a couple of questions here first. I have one here. Does your realistic description of places come from a live place that you have seen or
Both.
Or is it completely in your mind's eye?
There are places that I've never seen in real life, which I can describe down to a minutia for you. In a different novel, Midnight at Spanish Gardens, that place takes place in a place that's called the Spanish Gardens, and that place is real. Was real. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was so absolutely other dimensionally real that the people who went there over the years, if they were split apart for 30 years and you asked them to describe it, they would describe it to you in the same way, because it was so imprinting that once you went there, you basically never forgot it. And for sooner or later, I was going to set a story in that place, and that book is all about. Of course, I made it a tad more magical than it probably ever really was, but it was magical enough. The imprinting image was so strong that it had to have some sort of underlying magic to it. So yeah, there's places I've seen which I remember, which find their way to stories, and there are also places which literally don't exist anywhere except here.
Do you think that, earlier in the show we were speaking about dreaming places and dreaming whole stories? Do you think when things come from your dreams, that are they in fact not real places, or do you think that you actually are travel to a dream realm that is a very real place, and then bring that kind of back into this world? I guess kind of H.P. Lovecraft style, because that's really one of the claims, for a lot of his writing, was that these were real things that he was tapping into through the dream realm. And so I'm curious, because of how you describe how real they all are, and how
are real. I mean, they're real to me. They're real in the sense that when I'm in them, they are there. They are real. That's where I exist. When I wake up, sometimes I bring them back, and sometimes I don't. But while I'm in them, they are real. I have a lot of people tell me, "Oh, you dream in color." Yes, of course I do. Do you smell things? Yes, of course I do. I mean, dreams are real to me. They've always been. I've said goodbye to my grandparents after they died in a dream.
Yeah, it just I just find it very cool, because I can very much relate to that whole. Just sometimes it's like you step out and you're in a very real, very different, surreal place, right? And it is in fact quite real feeling. So we have another question here from Newton File. What advice do you have for someone flirting with the idea of becoming a writer, which might help them overcome hesitation?
Stop hesitating.
Just start doing it.
No, writing is something you just do. The first draft of anything you've ever written or you've ever write is going to be crap. That's what they're for. You have to be prepared for the fact that the first thing that you blurt out on the page is not the final version of it. It can't be and will never be. What happens when you go back, let me put it this way: a blank page does not help you. Words on a page help you. You have something to work with. If they're the wrong words, you will find that out, and you will be able to deal with that, to change them, to fix them, to rearrange, to get it better. But if you haven't written them in the first place, there's nothing there for you to work with. So what I tell people is, if you really want to be a writer, no one can stop you. If you don't, no one can help you.
That makes perfect sense to me, actually. Let's see. There's another one here. For L. Lake, is the poet based on a person that you have known, or is he a universal? But you are the poet.
That character gave me permission to just let go, to write the dream prose that in my head. In a way, I'm a split personality in a major way as well, and a poet is probably part of me.
Well, I guess that answers that question, doesn't it? So, speaking of poetry, though, and you had said that you were raised with on Oscar Wilde. I always get the wild thing. I think I love you in my head when I think of Oscar Wilde. I don't know, but do you actually?
Well, I do. What?
Do you actually have published poetry someplace?
Yes. I published a book of poetry when I was 19, of poems that I wrote when I was about 16. And oh boy, some of them look it. But there's a lot of stuff there that is a lot older than you would expect a 16-year-old to write. And I've written poetry in dribs and drabs ever since. But it's actually interesting that the only thing that I still write in my own native language is poetry.
What is the reader's language?
It's that deep and that rooted and that grounded. The only thing that I can reach for in poetical terms and then make it look like real. And have written English poetry too, but
Some languages, though, are more given to poetry as well. So, at least in my opinion, some languages are more given to it. So, okay. So that being said, that is the last question that I see here in our comments, and we've got some names, and I have put them onto. I'm going to pull up the Wheel of Wayne. You guys, now is the time to enter your name for a copy of Second Star. And I'm pulling up the wheel now with all of the names. Here we go. And let me just come take this off the screen. As you can see, so there are two ways to get your name onto this wheel. One is to be a Patreon subscriber on our Patreon, and then you will be automatically entered into every single drawing that we do, which is about 8 a month. We do 2 drawings a week. And the other way is to either put your name in the comments here for Author Reads, or put the magic word into the Fae News, and you can have a maximum of 2 entries per drawing. So I'm just going to check one more time to see if we have anybody else. I do not see anybody. We always have a little bit of lag, so I like to try to give the chance there. Here we go. And now we will do spin the wheel. Congratulations to Holly Hensley. You are the winner of today's book, Second Star. So huzzah to you, Holly. Thank you for being one of our Patreon patrons. So we are coming up here on the end of our time for this. Is there anything that you would like to say to everybody before we let you go today?
Thank you all for being here. I'm happy to share my stuff with you. And if you are in a position to do so, please help the Fairy Tales Cabin. The Kickstarter is waiting for you.
Yes, and I did put that. I will actually follow up after the show to put that Kickstarter link into the low bar, but the Kickstarter link is currently in the comments section for you guys, and you are more than halfway to your goal. So you just need a little bit more push over the edge if you guys just want to pop over there and even contribute a little bit of money, all the way up to getting a book and getting to name characters in stories. So fun things that are going on there. And I would also recommend, too, the last thing that I always like to remind everybody of before I end a show is, if you purchase anything, please, please leave that review for Alma wherever you purchase from, if it's at all possible to do so. It helps indie authors more than you guys know. So just get that in there. And with that said, today is Friday. Tomorrow is Cyber Samhain. We will be back here actually, and on Discord. We have quite a lineup beginning at 7:30 p.m. Pacific, including a costume contest and fairy court and all of the things. So we hope to see you guys back here tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. And then Sunday we will be back again. Busy weekend, right? Sunday we'll be back again for handmade home shopping from 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific. And with that said, have a good afternoon. Happy Friday, everybody. And I hope you are set to enjoy an amazing weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.